go.
26.
Thank you. Thank you, Sam. I'd like to welcome everybody to this public meeting of the Salt Lake City School Board of Education. Today's Tuesday, September 21st at 6 p.m. I would like to entertain a motion to enter a closed executive session. Anybody willing to motion?
I motion that we move the meeting to a closed executive session at 6:01.
Okay. All right. And that would be for the purpose of litigation and character and competence. Thanks, Mohammed. I have a second. So motion by Mohammed and seconded by Nate. We'll go ahead and vote, starting with you, Bryce.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Catherine Kennedy, yes.
Nate Salzer, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Melissa Ford, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Okay. That motion carries. We'll now I'd like to welcome everybody to this Salt Lake City School Board of Education meeting for tonight, Tuesday, September 21st, 2021. I'd like to welcome the school board members, Superintendent Gadsden, Business Administrator Kersley. I would like to also welcome our association representatives. We have from SLEA, President James Tobler. I see Mike Harmon, thank you for being here. From SLASA, we have the SLASA president is Dallin Miller, and the board representative tonight is Janelle Rodriguez. Welcome, Janelle. From Transportation, President Cindy Davis. From SLEOPA, President Steve Russo and board representative Cindy Mills. Welcome, thank you for being here, Cindy. Child Nutrition, President B. Alonzo. Buildings and Grounds, Shay Olson. Like to say a special thank you to all of those association reps and for all you do to support our employees. We value your work and thank you for being here tonight. I'd also like to read a statement as we start the meeting. As we've listened to the board's feedback to hold more study sessions, we met as a leadership team and decided tonight to try returning to a former board practice of having the second board meeting of the month be a board study meeting. The study session has been designed to provide the Board of Education with updates on board priorities. Additionally, the study meeting format provides time for the board to discuss major issues and ask important questions prior to taking action in a board business meeting. Our study meeting tonight will include 4 topics: equity framework, reflection and planning, the early learning plan, the sustainability plan, and planning for the upcoming board retreat or planning meeting. There will also be a few minutes miscellaneous updates from the superintendent. The discussions are intended to be more formal in nature. We will study each topic for about 30 minutes. No additional action beyond the consent agenda will be taken tonight. Even though the meeting is more informal, we will still ask for respectful engagement, with every board member having an opportunity to speak once before anyone speaks twice. But we aren't timing, we're asking questions. This is more informal discussion. Also, as it's outlined in our board policy, this agenda reflects board practice from before we took our meetings online pre-pandemic of hearing public comment at only the board business meeting. But after the board meeting tonight, I would welcome feedback on this format that we're implementing tonight, and I'm committed to ensuring that these meetings belong to the board and reflect our collective priorities. So thank you. I'd like to start with a Pledge of Allegiance, which I think, Nate, you asked
Dr. Taylor
to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll do a recognition.
Republic. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The recognition time on the agenda is an opportunity for us to recognize great things that are happening in the district. And really quickly, I'd like to recognize that the board spent this last weekend at a USVA Leadership Academy, which was well planned by Catherine and committee and Christy, and I appreciated what we learned while we were there. But by way of recognition, I'd like to recognize our board member Jenny Sika, coming in second place in the golf tournament. So good job, Jenny. So congratulations. Superintendent,
Rising to the top.
did you have a recognition, Superintendent?
Yes, just a brief recognition, and I'd like to ask Dr. Hall just to come and speak with to it very quickly. We have started a Utah STEM ecosystem design studio through teaching and learning, and I want to recognize that as an innovative program and just make the board aware of that. If you would just speak with that or speak to that.
Sure, thank you. So we'll be bringing this to the board later as a study session so that we can go into some details, but our work is really beginning to start envisioning what our district could look like as a STEM ecosystem, as a model for the state and as a model throughout the nation. This was an application process for us to join a thought partner and to join with other like-minded districts who are interested in moving STEM activities forward. STEM, again, is science, technology, engineering, and math. And we have very, very strong science and mathematics programs and would like to continue to grow our technology and engineering programs, not only within our district, but also with our community partners and businesses. And so those people through the Salt Lake Educational Foundation and through our science office in the Teaching and Learning Department will be working to bring those partners together and collaborate with them in creating a vision where we can work within and without to find placement opportunities, examples, models for students and teachers in these fields. So we're very excited about this. And again, we'll have Candace Penrod, our science supervisor, come and speak about that with James Yappius, our executive director of the Salt Lake Educational Foundation, in a couple of weeks, I believe. So thank you.
So I recognize that program because, again, our theme this year is We're on the Move, and this is one example of how we're on the move.
Thank you, Dr. Hall. All right. Let's go ahead and move to the consent agenda. And I will open for a motion on the consent agenda.
I move we accept the consent agenda consisting of the purchasing and accounting reports and of the recommendation for case number 22002 we discussed during closed session.
Okay. A motion.
I second.
A motion by Catherine, seconded by Bryce. Any discussion to the motion? Okay. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and vote. We'll start with precinct 1.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Catherine Kennedy, yes.
Nate Salazar.
Mohammed, yes.
Melissa Ford, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
All right, thank you. I just realized I failed to mention that our student board member, Yadira Garcia, is not feeling well today. And so I let her know that we want her to take care of herself and focus on getting better and on her studies. And we'll hopefully see her at the next board meeting. So get better, Yadira. And I'm sure if you want to reach out to her board members and let her know that she was missed, that would be great. All right, let's move to the study portion of our agenda. As you can see, we have the 4 topics. This equity framework, reflection, and planning will be led by Dr. Sandra Buendia and Dr. Gutierrez. I know that Dr. Buendia will share her presentation with us. I think they're looking for us to, as we study this, be prepared to give direction at a future meeting on the equity framework and the equity definition that you've been working on. And so I think that they have some good things planned for us tonight.
President Ford, if I could, just a quick announcement to the board. I know this is a more informal study session setting and meeting today, but I will be keeping track of the 30-minute time frame that we loosely discussed at the beginning of the meeting, and I'll be giving a 5-minute just a heads up when we reach that. But if we need more time, we can discuss it as a board.
If we need more time, that's up to the board. We'll just have that discussion at 30 minutes. Thank you.
We should be able to address it all.
And that's fine. Okay. So thank you for inviting us to have a conversation, a deeper conversation about equity and our equity framework and our equity definition. So what we want to do is, sorry, can I take the mask off? Is that okay? Okay, sorry. All right. So what we want to do in tonight's presentation is be able to model what we've been asking our principals and teachers to do, which are our SEL 3 signature practices. And so we want to start with a welcoming routine. So really quickly, okay. Really quickly, choose a partner. So if you can, if you need somebody, I'll volunteer Dr. Gutierrez.
I choose Jenny Seco.
Does everyone? So two. Okay. All right. So.
I'll be with Mohammed.
And I'm going to come over, and I'll be your partner. Okay.
Jenny,
choose quick. Choose partner A.
Is Alan not playing?
Or you guys.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So quickly choose partner A. Who's partner A? Who's partner B? All right. So partner A, tell your partner you're the best.
You're the best.
You're the best.
You are the
Okay. Ready? Partner B, tell partner A you're a star.
You're a
You are.
Woohoo! All right. Hey, we gotta walk the talk.
That's right.
Okay, so one of the things that we're gonna do is engage you using Kagan structures, which you know that the SEL funds that you allocated paid for a lot of that training. So what we are going to do is make sure that this is a safe space, knowing that our community, our village, we're all at different stages of understanding equity work, and our journey, right? And we're in this together. So I gave you, and it's in a particular order, and for no other reason, because we're going to be collecting them so that I can provide you with a summary later on of what some of the responses were. So no need to add any names. So the first thing that we're going to do is ask you, using a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being,
Nope, that was not the right direction.
all right, there you go. Using a scale from 1 to 5, are we, it's not you personally, the district and our work, are we at the novice level, like taking baby steps, or are we that gold standard, exemplary? And, and there's a possibility that we're somewhere in the middle. So just considering that range, just quickly write down, you just need to do one number. You can't do more than one number.
Are we allowing halves?
No halves. Whole numbers. Whole numbers.
We want to clarify.
Round up or round down. So when you're done, just go ahead and pass. So use that. Is it the pink one? Is that the first one?
Okay.
Just pass it over to us, and I'll collect them. And, oh, somebody gave me an extra one. Do I get to choose the number for it? Okay, so for the most part, these are all threes. So 5 out of the entire group, out of the 8, feel like we're in the middle. And, you know, and for those of you who chose something different, it doesn't mean that anybody's wrong. It just means we're at different levels of understanding and different levels of experience with equity, right? Either personally, professionally. And so one of the things we discussed last time was part of what we need to do to create a common understanding is come up with a common definition for our school district. And so I'm going to hand the review of what we had shared with you the last time.
And so I want to remind the board that we are requesting that the equity definition be adopted formally as part of the equity framework. So that's why it still does say draft on it. Having a common definition will assist us in having a systemic paradigm shift. When I was before you last, I did say equity is not a curriculum, equity is not a program, equity is not an initiative. So we need to have that systemic paradigm shift, and having the common definition will assist in that. I wanted to break down the definition to just the 3 different parts that we addressed. Sentence number 1, it's the simple summary of what equity is for our district. It is making sure every student has the support they need to reach their goals. And then the second sentence, we had a lot of discussion because we already have the Non-Discrimination Statement on our website that specifically addresses certain categories. And we also have the Americans with Disabilities Act that addresses certain categories. And so we narrowed it down to the specific categories that you see there, and then left it open with relevant characteristics because we are constantly evolving. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and believe it or not, 30 years ago when I was in high school, have my 30th high school reunion this year, there were certain groups that we did not talk about, that we did not acknowledge, that now we do talk about and we do acknowledge. And so we don't know 5 years from now, 10 years from now, if there will be a new category of individuals that we might need to address. And then just kind of thinking about it, I thought people with long-term COVID effects, they might come forward and say, I need better filtration. Or, you know, we don't know. It's just an example. And then finally, the last part of to the best of our ability. I know Dr. Buendia gave you the book, Belonging Through a Culture of Dignity, and I just think of that quote, when we know better, we do better. So to the best of our ability, because we don't know everything there is to know about every single group, but once we learn, then we should modify our behavior to make sure we're honoring them. And so that's why to the best of our ability. And then from there, I'm going to hand it back to Dr. Buendia.
I'm the king and queen. Okay, now take that orange sticky note and list your top 3 priorities. Again, don't add your name, just list your top 3 priorities. And if you can just, so that I know that you're done writing the top 3 priorities, can you just put a thumbs up? And then I'll let you know what we're doing next. Okay, I'm scanning the room. All right, so when you are finished, pair up with somebody different than you did before. And I'm not expecting you to get up and walk. Just kind of face somebody different. And, you know, so maybe, Chrissy, are you okay if I pair it with you? Okay.
Yo, so.
I want to revise that drafted statement. I think that starts.
Yeah, no, it does. It doesn't.
I want to say all, so you say, we say, gender preferences.
Okay, can you go ahead and pass your stickies towards us? When you're finished talking. Thanks. It helps me to get a look at the next color. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Jenny's shot.
Static.
Oh, thank you. Perfect. I'm just going to point out that these activities really require some level of engagement. And so that's why we went ahead and did the training, because we wanted teachers to be able to utilize these strategies to ensure that students are actively listening, actively participating, there's something that you're constantly doing. If you're not writing, you're listening. If you're not listening, you're reading. There's something constantly engaging for you. So with that, we're going to head back to Dr. Gutierrez.
So part of the equity framework that you've seen before is the removal of institutional barriers. And I've told you before, this is you, because it includes governance and the organization as a whole. So it's you as a governing body along with the superintendent. If you've already begun reading the Belonging book, in chapter 1, the authors do state that these kinds of they do call them initiatives, although I'm not, need to be led from the top. So the superintendent needs to be the one that says, equity is a priority, and the board supports the superintendent in ensuring that equity is a priority for everything that we do. It's not the only book where you will find that. If you ever read Courageous Conversations About Race by Glenn Singleton, it's in the first edition, and it is also in the second edition, and it is why Pacific Educational Group will not engage with a organization unless they have the board engage in the work as well. Because he's also found that if the board is not in support of the equity work, it's a little bit more challenging to get it rooted into the organization. So this work won't be easy. It will get hard at times. It might get uncomfortable, but we need your engagement, and it leads right into the next question, which is.
And so this is intended just to get a grasp of, how we're all feeling. You as a board, us as district level supervisors, and in terms of how we get the work done together, okay? And so we're learning together. We're going to be learning from the responses that you're sharing. So the next one, if you can use the next sticky note and answer that question. What do you believe is the role of the board in our equity journey. We are in the journey right now. So what do you believe the role is of your role is in this entire journey along with us?
Mr. Salazar, can I do a time check?
Yep, please.
You're at 15 minutes and 26 seconds.
Okay, we're doing good. Thank you.
And so that I'm not inconveniencing you, I'm going to be collecting them and then distributing them, just kind of mixing them up. So if you're ready to have me collect it, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm just mixing them up. And hopefully we won't give you your own. And if we do, let us know. You might hand them out in that direction. Awesome. So if we hand you your own, let us know. We'll switch you up. That's you?
Oh, keep mine, because then I'll be the expert on it. Thank you.
Okay. I'm hoping that's not you.
That's good.
All right. Is that yours? Okay, perfect.
Sorry in advance whoever gets mine. My handwriting is
that yours?
complicated.
I'll write there with you.
Who is missing? Are you, okay. All right. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Or one friend. Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right. There you go. Okay, just take a minute to read what you have. And if anybody is willing, you don't have to read what you have, just an aha. If you can share an aha that's come across from, what you're reading. And you don't have to have one.
Not necessarily an aha, but I would say right in line with what I think and believe is providing resources. The board has to provide resources for the work and ensuring our student achievement plan is aligned, and that's walking the talk.
Thank you. Anyone else? And I'm really not trying to put you on the spot.
No worries. We are on the spot every day.
True.
We're in a public meeting. So the one that which I personally as well think it is very important part to think about as a board member, which is policies that are drafted as a measure as well to monitor the progress and also to follow up on the outcomes of those policies.
Thank you. Anyone else before I collect those?
If I can speak to mine. So I think that one of the things that we do a lot in education is we talk about plans. We talk about what we'd like to do, but do we actually achieve them, and how do we hold ourselves accountable? And so as I look at this statement, the accountability piece is multifaceted. So either you're going to figure out how to achieve those goals, have an evaluation of those goals, and then continue to grow from those goals, or we're just going to continue to be a district that puts our goals on the shelf and they collect dust.
Thank you. All right, can I inconvenience you to send those forward?
And just so that we stay on good time, as Dr. Buendia is picking those up, I'm going to move on to our pyramid for the framework. And you've seen this before, and I was really excited to find the Alliance for Resource Equity has put out 10 dimensions of educational resource equity to unlock opportunities for every student. And our framework addresses all 10 dimensions. So you've already committed to social and emotional learning, which in our framework is the learning environment. And in the 10 dimensions, it is also positive and inviting school climate and student support and intervention, which is the MTSS portion of SEL. I think that's the strongest portion of the framework because Emily Sutherland has already been working on it and has done a fabulous job. I told you the blue piece, that is you. I'm very happy to have multiple opportunities to come before you and work with you. We have governance and the organization under there, but we also will include school funding, learning ready facilities, and diverse schools and classrooms with Board Member Kennedy had said before, one of her interests was us having a more diverse workforce. And then a big portion of the equity framework will be a strong educational outcomes through high quality instruction and leading for learning, which will then address teaching quality and diversity, school leadership quality and diversity, empowering rigorous content, instructional time and attention, and high quality early learning. So you haven't seen the full framework, but all of that is included, and so I was really excited to see that we've already have the documents in place, and that at some point in this school year, we will ask you for a formal adoption of the equity framework. So, having thrown a lot of information at you, we have another question.
Although I know we're going to be running out of time, so I'm going to modify it a little bit. So if you can go ahead and write your answer to question 4 on that neon green sheet and just pass it forward. Because like I said, what I'll do is I will write up a summary and share it with you. So what role do you think an equity framework plays in our equity journey? And as you're doing that, we'll just give you a little bit of time to think through it. Do you mind going and hopefully, I know you can multitask. So we'll have Dr. Gutierrez go into the next one because I just want to make sure that we have time for you to ask questions.
So then another piece of our equity framework is the equity lens, which is a series of 6 questions, and 3 out of the 6, if I'm remembering correctly, have sub-questions that just help to guide any decision-making process. We have piloted the equity lens with our network directors. They were utilizing it from about March forward. It was introduced to all administrators at the Admin Institute, and it will also need to be adopted as part of the framework. So the questions, ask questions such as, have you included all stakeholders? What have you done to amplify the voice of those groups that we don't usually hear from? Who's benefiting from this action, who's not benefiting from this action, and how can that be rectified? So, like I said, it's a series of 6 questions, and it will also need to be adopted as part of the framework. And so the final question,
which for the sake of time as well, I'm just going to have you, if you don't mind, answer question 4 and question 5, and then move it forward to us as soon as you answer it. And so question 5 is please list 3 programs, policies, or practices you would like to see prioritized as starting points for our equity work. So, and we're trying to honor your time, so we'll just collect these, and once you're done forwarding them, then we can go ahead and have time for some questions. And how much time do we have for questions?
Well, right now you're at 5 minutes and 20 seconds for the 30 minutes, but again, it's up to the board if we want to extend
We
that.
can take a little more time if we need, if we'd like to. Questions from board members? I would like to see that equity lens and those 6 questions.
Okay.
I think that would be helpful and necessary before we would adopt the program. Other comments or questions from the board? You've given us a lot of information.
Yes, very quickly.
And this is something the board had clearly discussed as a priority before we hired Dr. Gatson. So I appreciate the board's willingness to engage in this. I don't think that this is an exhaustive conversation at this point. We've got a lot of work to do.
Absolutely.
We have committed to bring this back to the board quarterly, and this is one of those quarterly updates and work with the board. So I definitely appreciate the opportunity to allow us to bring this back to the board.
Board Member Kennedy?
And in terms of the equity statement, I hope that we can give you some feedback about that. If
Absolutely.
It's got some good things, so I'd like to do that in a meeting possibly.
Thank you.
Have the board look at it and give some feedback. Also, I would like to hear an update about what's happening with, you gave this presentation to the district, is that right? To teachers in the district?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Did you give this presentation to teachers in the district, or?
I don't think we've shared it with the teachers yet because we wanted board approval. So
Okay.
we wanted definitely a discussion about the, we just don't feel comfortable sharing a document and statement without having board approval and board feedback.
I just was
Yes.
wondering whether that had been done. That's good to know. So I want to see the 6 questions due. And then I'd like to know really an update about how equity work is going, how we plan to measure equity work. I mean, what are the measurements we're going to use to see our success, and to really hear a report on what's happening in the district and is to as specific and aggregated a degree as we can. What's happening, how is it happening, what are we doing? I appreciate this. I hope that we are informed, and I think we can always be more informed about our equity work and what we need to do, but I'd really like to know what's happening in the district itself.
So very briefly, I am partnered with 5 schools at varying degrees because of course they're at different stages in their journeys. So I'm partnered with 5 schools. They're the ones that have come forward and said we're ready for equity teams, and we are having that exact discussion. What does that look like? Who's on the team? What kind of work are we going to do? How are we going to measure it? So that's where the bulk of the work is happening, and that's Ensign, Escalante, Edison, Bonneville, and Nibley Park. And I'm awaiting to finalize with Glendale. And then in terms of other equity work, there's quite a bit happening in teaching and learning, but I'm happy to bring a report back to you, a more formal report back to you, at the direction of Dr. Gatson.
Sure. And like I said, I'd just really love to hear some specific ways that we plan to measure our accomplishments in this area.
Okay.
And I think that the equity team, along with the superintendency, should provide those. I mean, I think that that's what we're looking to you to do.
Most definitely.
Thanks, Catherine. Christy, go ahead.
Thank you so much for being here tonight. Appreciate the exercise that we've gone through. I feel a little unprepared, for the conversation tonight, just because, we really didn't know what we'd be talking about tonight. We didn't get the presentation until I think it was Thursday night, and then all of us were engaged, in a professional development this weekend. And so I wish I would have had a little bit more time. You know, I know a lot of the answers might have been just off the cuff, you know, about what you've given us. And I think that given a little bit more time and discussion with you, we could have had a little bit more of an interaction. So I'm sorry. I also feel like the time was short, you know, and maybe that was what you wanted, was, you know, a very short amount of time for us to talk about this. I think equity is a huge discussion, and because it's of varying degrees. One of the things that I wanted to ask about was the institutional, you know, piece that you had in that. Was it a triangle? I can't remember. Or upside down triangle. I can't remember what it looked like. Can we go back to that? Oh, there we go. Removal of institutional barriers. And I think that, you know, that to me is part of what the board's work is. When you talk about our policies, when you talk about our resources, you know, and so I said to Sandra in our conversation that I feel like this is a conversation that all of us need to have together, so we have common goals, that we have a foundation that is common. Because if you have 9 different people with 9 different goals or 9 different ideas, and then you multiply that into all the schools, then it becomes really complicated. And so having that question that's specific to what's the board's role, what's the teacher role, what's the administrator's role in all of this, still has to have a foundation that's similar. Am I thinking the right way?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so for me, that would have been something, you know, for us to have more time to talk about, and then my answers might have been a little bit differently, you know, worded or crafted, because we would be working as a team instead of individuals, you know, around those questions. So I think it's a great start. But the other piece too that I wanted to ask about is, I know that USBE is doing some work right now around the equity lens and around rules. So could we also have you come back and talk to us about that, and what that is? There an alignment? Is there going to be some challenges? You know, what is that going to look like? And I'm hoping that you two are engaged, you know, with the board in the conversation that they're having right now, because, you know, it's, I know they're trying to craft something that's going to be statewide,
Right.
but is it going to be a challenge to us in doing the work that we want to do?
It will. And so I meet with other directors across the state. We meet every other month, and USBE is our host, and they're the ones that give us the agenda. Holly McIntosh, I believe is her last name. She does a great job of sending us the agendas and the policies. They had a policy that they were going to discuss 3 weeks ago, and unfortunately they decided to table it.
Right.
It will impact how we are implementing G24 for sure. Okay. There's one portion that now allows parents to have sort of a way to come to the district and share their concerns about any type of lesson that might be happening in a school that they're concerned about. So we'll have to have a complaint process around that, and it will make the work a little bit more challenging for sure, but they're trying to craft it. It's just been tabled at this time. Mm-hmm.
So may I have one more follow-up question?
Sure.
So this past week, I think probably like other board members, I've had several constituents reach out to me about our SEL work, and also about, you know, what are our talking point, or how do we feel about the learning and development of our children in our schools, and how does CRT relate to it? And one of the things that caught me off guard is that we really don't have any talking points as a district around CRT. But yet that keeps coming up. You know, I thought that Dr. Hall provided a really great document for me that I then shared, you know, with, that talks about what the environments are, what our expectations are. Mm-hmm. Dr. Hall, what was that called again?
The Superintendent's Statement on Equity and Salt Lake City School District.
Thank you. And so I sent that link, you know, to them, but it's going to continue to be a conversation. And so I think that the complaint process, you know, that they're now putting in place, along with, you know, the the diversity of the state, and that these outside groups and inside groups, are going to be coming towards the board. So
Yes.
I think that for me personally, as we go through this journey and this conversation, President Ford, what would be helpful is to have timely, conversations about when it's happening at the state level and how that's impacting their work here, but also at the same time providing us really good talking points as a board so that we're saying the same thing. I think that I don't want to be saying something different
Right.
than Board Member Bay might be saying, because we just don't have a solid document that we can be
So
provided.
That statement that you're talking about with Dr. Hall, it was a collaborative effort to craft it, and critical race theory is addressed in there. The basic talking point would be we're not engaged in teaching CRT at any level within the Salt Lake City School District. We're not.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what I said when I passed on that document to them, but it doesn't seem to be satisfying.
Correct.
The biggest issue out there with critical race theory is, first, I don't think many people understand what critical race theory is. And they're couching many of the conversations that are standards aligned, that have to deal with multiple perspectives. We teach students how to think, not what to think. And anything that is not comfortable is couched under CRT. And so Dr. Gutierrez is exactly right. In Salt Lake City School District, we don't teach CRT. And superintendents have said that nationally, across the country. And for some reason, it has not caught on, and there is not that understanding that it is not taught in our classrooms.
Thank you for those comments. I know this is an important subject to the board. It's something that the board prioritizes. We have a lot of work to do, and I appreciate the time you've spent with us. I want to make sure, we're at our 30 minutes, but I think what you're hearing is that we want to talk about this
Absolutely.
frequently, in depth. It's something we can spend time on in perhaps even different settings than a study session.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I want to make sure everybody's had an opportunity to share what they want to share. Mohammed?
Yeah, so, oh, my goodness, we hear about word equity, and the majority, the definition that is usually given is from Webster dictionary. As a community servant and as a minority myself and a parent of minority kids, equity is just the reality of what we see in terms of you have better system than I do just because you live in this side and I don't live in that side. Just because you are black or brown and I'm not. Or just because, of your social status, economic status versus mine. And we see that, sadly to say, happening everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why personally I wish we have more time. And I really hope actually we can make this happen sooner than later to get back into this. I don't know what we can do, but we need to make it happen because this is a topic that we can't just have 30 minutes and move on.
Yeah.
This is a topic that we need to sit down and hatch until we're all sweating by the end of the conversation. Because that is the only way for us to be able to address and be the leading school and district in our community to resolve this issue. Because otherwise, we would not be dealing with CRT. And it...
Thanks, Mohammed.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate this.
So,
Do you want closing thoughts? Yep.
I want an optimistic closure.
Yep.
Yeah.
So at this point, I'm not going to ask you to do the activity right now, but sometime before you leave this evening, if you can go up to another board member and start with this STEM, I can't thank you enough for, and be specific. And so what I'm going to use is, I can't thank you enough for being willing to engage in a difficult conversation. It's very complex. You are correct. It warrants a lot more time and depth of knowledge and conversation. The intent for today, I don't want anyone to feel as if they were unprepared, so I'm sorry, board members, the intent was to get your initial reaction. That's why I'm going to write a summary, and it'll be bulleted so that you can see where your commonalities are and maybe differences. And so then, because it's once you recognize where we are in common, what we have in common in our thoughts, and where we have different points of view, then it helps us engage in that deeper conversation. So I just want to thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
All right. Dr. Hall, I'm sure this is you. We're discussing the early learning plan. Every year, the board is asked to approve the early learning plan, which needs to be submitted to the State Board of Education. And board members, when we approved this in August, asked for us to have a study session so that we could become very familiar with this plan. There's quite a bit of work, as you know, because we've read it, that has gone into it, and as you all know, because you are engaged in it, and literacy is a priority of the board as well, and so I'd like to welcome you to the table and ask you to go ahead with your study topic. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here tonight with you and to kind of work out with you what the study session format's going to feel like. And so I will say that I don't have as many engaging activities as my colleagues do. So now that I know that that's a thing, we'll work toward that in the future. But we're glad to be here with you tonight and talk about the early learning plan. I have an agenda that we'll go through, but first I'd like to introduce who's with me here tonight, because some of you don't know everyone. First, this is Holly McIntosh. Holly McIntosh is our mathematics supervisor and expert of all things. She has been a K-6 teacher, an administrator in our district, and has been our math supervisor for 5 years, I think. 7 years. 7 years. Oh, time flies when you're having fun. I lose the COVID year on a regular basis. So we're glad to have her with us tonight, and Dr. Chelsea Malouf, who is our literacy director. And wait, I know this one. She's been with us for like 3 months. And so I can still remember back that far. But before that, she was also a teacher. She was an academic coach with us. She's been an administrator in the district. And I'm just very glad to be doing the introductory work and then turning it over to these two experts. I do want to say that you did not previously receive these slides, because we kind of were thinking through, as we got questions from board members over the last couple of days about what information would be best. We thought just about talking about it without slides, but then we thought, well, let's put some things like the legislation up in a slide so that you can see it as we reference it. And then, of course, we will attach these to the minutes so that you can see it. But they do deal with the issues that came up and the questions that you have had around our early literacy plan. So first, just our discussion agenda. We'd like to talk first about the requirement for the learning plan. This is something we do every year, but we recognize that many of our board members are new. So this is your new first year to this. So let's talk about that process. And then some of the changes to the plan and to the legislation for 21-22. Including the legislative background, and then there were some questions about why did we have to change the plan after we were submitted. So I'm happy to talk about those. Then we're going to talk, Holly is going to talk about the new math assessment pieces, and then she'll take some questions on that. And then Chelsea will talk about the professional development plan and the side of that for the letters. And so we'll hopefully be able to answer all of your questions, and so I'm just going to jump right in. So the literacy, the early learning plan of 21-22 used to be called the early literacy plan. But this year it was changed to learning because we have a change in the legislation that we now include math as well as literacy. It includes goals for, it has in the past included our goals for literacy growth in K3. Those are set through our data on a growth model at the state level. And we use the Acadience reading assessments at the beginning, middle, and end of year to show that growth trajectory. Once again, those used to be called DIBBLES, but DIBBLES and Acadience had a divorce, and one of them kept the testing and one of them kept the name, and so we kept Acadience for that reason. So that funding that we get through this application is meant to support the professional development and learning of teachers around literacy. And in this district, we have used that to help fund some of our K3 academic coaches, or coaches that support teachers, of course, K6, but also support K3. So that has been a part of what has funded our academic coaches that the board has placed at a 0.5 at our Title I schools and a 0.25 at our non-Title I schools to support that academic learning and development. And every year, this plan is approved by the Board of Education here in Salt Lake City, and then it is also sent up for approval after that by the Utah State Office, well, Board of Education, but the staff inside of that. So again, a couple of new components this year. First, again, it is the learning plan instead of the literacy plan. And funding was provided for state-approved professional development in literacy. That was tricky, and I'm going to show you why. This year, we have added the Acadience assessment in math, and that's what Ms. McIntosh is going to talk about. And what we hope is that, or what we have been told will happen, is that in 22-23, math will be authorized to share funding. So the change that occurred between you seeing it in August and it going forward up to the board was that they asked us to remove the mathematics section of the professional learning plan. This was the first time we had written that. And I found this tonight, and I had to come out and show everybody that I wasn't completely losing my mind, because that's on the table. But on page 8 of the application, it does say that this is professional learning opportunities in early literacy and mathematics. So we wrote it for early literacy and mathematics. But then the state office kicked it back, and they returned it to us and said the funding hasn't been authorized to be used with math this year. So that's going to hopefully happen in the legislative session in January of this year. And so as you've been receiving the updates from Yandri Chatwin, Ms. Chatwin, over each of the legislative sessions, this first happened in 20, it was funded in 21, but apparently the funding has not yet been authorized. And so that was why it was returned to us. We simply removed the math piece. The money stayed the same. It was the same amount of money. And so we will use that money to support our letters training that Dr. Malouf will talk about after Ms. McIntosh talks about the math. So that's the kind of the summary of the changes and why those happened, and what this plan entails. Again, it has previously just dealt with literacy, but now it deals with both literacy and math. So I'm going to turn it over to Holly. Do you want this one?
Nope, I'm good here. Great, thanks. As Dr. Hall said, the legislative changes to House Bill 114, which started as an early literacy plan, allowed it to include mathematics. It became an early learning plan, included mathematics. That was adopted in 2020 and then funded in 2021. So it required that the state determine a standardized assessment to measure acquisition of mathematics skills. And the idea was that those would be looking at early learning, so kindergarten and grades 1 through 3. They wanted it to be predictive indicators of academic achievement based on those early mathematics in computation, problem solving. And the state needed to develop and approve this for statewide use by LEAs to assess mathematics competency for kindergarten and grades 1 through 3. The LEAs are required to administer the benchmark assessments to students at the beginning and middle and end of the year, so 3 times a year. And that's for first grade through third grade. It's approved for kindergarten, not required. However, our district is requiring it for kindergarten. As a result, we think it's really important information on our earliest learners as well, just like we're doing with the literacy and the reading piece. And after administering the benchmarks, parent letters and reports go home with information about how the students did. And we want to make sure that this is an assessment, and the state has done this in their selection, that identifies students who might be at risk for further difficulties in mathematics, and that it measures carefully using data. Acadians Math and Reading, the program for both, the assessment for both, has some really compelling features. They're standardized assessments. That means they're administered and scored the same way consistently. They're brief, they're reliable, they're valid, and they're also sensitive to growth over a relatively short period of time. This year, in the 2021 school year, Acadians Math is required at the benchmarking level. So that will be testing all our K-3 students 3 times a year. Benchmarking is always conducted using grade level materials, and that'll be what we're doing this year with our students. Next year is the requirement for benchmarking as well as progress monitoring. And progress monitoring refers to assessing those students who have shown on a benchmark test to be potentially at risk for difficulties in mathematics, that they may need to be assessed more frequently between the benchmarks with a progress monitoring to see that that instruction on a skill that seems to be at risk, that the instruction is making a difference. So a little assessing in between those benchmarks with progress monitoring to see that we're making a difference for those students. Now, when you're progress monitoring, you could use at grade level materials or below grade level materials, depending on the student need for that. USBAE is not requiring that for us this year, but next year. However, because literacy and reading is a little further along, they are benchmarking and progress monitoring at this time. Testing times, so you have an idea of how much time the assessment takes. In kindergarten and first grade, kindergarten is all delivered one-on-one, and first grade has some one-on-one components and some whole class components. But you'll see there that there's some differences in time. Kindergarten, there's 3 minutes worth of testing. First grade, 8 minutes individually, and then some that are given at the middle and the end of the year takes about 6 minutes. And there are some variations between beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year, of course, in content and to a certain extent in the time required for that as well.
So we included the reading testing times, even though we aren't going to spend much time on that. I just included them for your reference. It's been around for a while, but in case you want to make a, I mean, not a comparison because they're completely different, but just to use it as a familiar point. So those are there for you as well.
Very good. And as far as the administration, anyone in our LEA that has been trained in administration and scoring of the assessment could administer the assessment. That could be a teacher, a special educator, specialist, parapro, administrator, any other LEA employees can be involved in that assessing. Whoever does the assessing, it's always very important that the teacher gets the assessment data to make sure that they have that information.
Okay, so that's the first bit about our changes and about the math piece that has been added to complement the reading and literacy piece with our professional development plan. Before we move into letters in the professional development plan piece, are there any questions about these sections?
I understand that the state regulations or the USBA rules make you test kids on grade level. What kind of testing do you do for kids that might be above grade level? How do you measure their progress and their where they are in terms of that grade level?
Yeah, at this point, because the assessment is really designed to identify students who might be at risk, there's at benchmark and above benchmark. And then really the sensitivity is more for students who are below benchmark or where we might have some concerns. I'm speaking for mathematics.
Mm-hmm. So in literacy, it's somewhat similar. The test is predictive validity, so we're just looking at those predictive indicators. It is not a requirement of teachers to continue up. However, many of them do, and at that point we look at more diagnostic assessments that they take longer but go more in depth of what a student needs and where they are at with their reading fluency and ability.
Okay. So we have some abilities to do that, and we're doing it in literacy, but not yet in math, because the math testing is new anyway. I hope that we are able to accommodate our students that might be performing lower, but also that we're monitoring and making sure that our students who may be achieving at a higher level are still making progress. I hope we're able to do that, and that we do that in a consistent way.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Okay, then I'm going to turn it to Dr. Malouf to talk to us a little bit about our letters professional development and the professional development money that was, for the first time this year, included in this early learning plan.
So we have two different levels of letters professional development happening in the district, and they are very similar in content, but organizationally they are different. So the first one, the main one, is the K3, and this is similar to what we talked about back in August. So K3 is part of the USBE requirements for K3 teachers based on our growth targets, which I'll talk about in just a minute. This includes K3 teachers and special education teachers. USBE is covering the cost of this. They are also running the training with national trainers through letters. So everything that we have done for this has been through them as far as getting accounts and setting things up and putting together cohorts. Then we have a group that we had originally called our 4-6 group, but now I'm just calling it our non-K3 group, because it is more than just it is more than just our 4 through 6 teachers. This is where we also have paraprofessionals included. We have several administrators who are participating along with their teachers in this group, and it just was becoming confusing to some people when I would say that, and they said, well, I don't teach 6th grade. Okay, so we're going to come up with a new name, and it is now just our non-K3. So the content of these trainings will be exactly the same as the other group. The difference is we are paying for this, and our trainers are literacy coaches who are certified through letters as facilitators. So that is exciting, and a few of them have already started the trainings with other districts. They've been contracted out prior to this because they started this process before. So the expectations are the same. What they will be doing at each of the sessions is the same. It's just they will be in different groups with different people. And then the administrators will also have 2 days, but we have yet to hear when those will be, that will help the administrators support their teachers through that. So a reminder on the growth targets. I'm realizing that this is a little smaller than I
know, it is small.
than I could do. So the growth target measures individual student growth and is different from grade level proficiency. So the state benchmarks were for 60% or more students to make typical or above typical growth. Actually, that is 62, correct?
Well, for our goal is 62.
Oh, okay.
Subgroups are 60.
Okay.
Sorry, I might have said that badly.
And then if an LEA had 4 or more demographic subgroups that that did not meet this growth target, then they were included in this letters training with USBE. So if we go to our next slide, you will see, and we've included 3 years of data. As you will see, we have been growing. And even last year with the pandemic, we did better than I was very pleasantly surprised. So for all students, the goal was 62%, which we made as a district, which is a great celebration. However, we did not meet the subgroup goal of, we had more than 4 subgroups that were below 60%. And those were our economically disadvantaged, our multilingual learners, our Black and African American students, which were really close, which is why we went out to 3 digits, just to show how close, and they did not round the way that I would have rounded. Our Hispanic Latino students, our Native American and Alaska Native students, our Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander students, and our special education students. Almost all of them were very close, but that is why we were included in this cohort. And I think I mentioned this back in August, but in case I didn't, so in the state of Utah, 69 LEAs were required to participate. However, they are now up to over 80 because they did open it as a choice for those who didn't qualify but still wanted to participate. Okay, so
Dr. Maloof, can I interrupt you for a quick question from Dr. Kennedy?
So I just would like to point out that that's the kind of equity data that I'd like to be seeing, you know, and what can we do to change those numbers so they're more even. This is a great example of equity data. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kennedy.
With additional funds, we looked at professional development opportunities in literacy for K-3. And what we decided to do with this big undertaking is to support our letters work and support teachers in completing this work. Probably the biggest thing that we're doing is we are offering phonics and word work routines, PLCs. So the phonics and word work routines were created by our coaches in the Salt Lake City School District to align with letters, and this was before letters was a requirement, but it was something that they were looking at, and to make up for some deficient areas that we were seeing in our student data. So this was created in-house. It is very wonderful. And what we are doing this year is we are combining that with much more of a tie to letters to support teachers through PLCs. So these are completely optional. They are offered after school. They are paid for their time. They're getting relicensure credit. And we are helping teachers understand the requirements, understand things that they can do with students, and helping them with the requirements for the letters certification. So there are 2 PLCs per unit, and there are 4 units. However, within those 2 PLCs, we give 2 times. So we offer them on Tuesdays and Thursdays so that we're trying to match schedules and really make it available to everyone to participate. And those are going very well. I highly recommend them to teachers who are participating who want some additional support. So our training plan includes these dates. So the blue are the different units that we will be doing this year. There are 4 units, go along with our 4 asynchronous days. And then in green, those are the district supports that we are providing in addition beyond what USBE and Letters is providing. Our goal is to really have this be successful. We see it as a wonderful opportunity. It's a very expensive training, and so to have this opportunity to participate at the state level is great, and we want it to be very successful. I think it's going to move our students and our teachers further than anything that we have done. So those district supports are listed there, and then in the yellow is the National Trainer Days. So each of those lead up. The idea is that they're doing pre-work so that when they come to those National Trainer Days, there is a baseline of understanding for teachers and participants, and so they can move forward from there. Questions?
Questions, board members?
Sorry, I have a lot
Yes,
of questions.
yes, go ahead.
So how are we working to make letters effective for multi-language learners?
So really great question, and it actually is, it's a lovely pairing. Having just been at Mountain View, which is a DLI school, and talking with the DLI teachers who are participating, but also just teachers across the board, what this provides is a very deep understanding for teachers of understanding and using the English language and what those pieces are. So they, at the end of this, will, and as they're in process, will have the knowledge and understanding to really see what is holding a child back and be able to support at that level and move forward. And with our MLLs, a lot of it is they are trying to make sense of language in their native language. And so this will help teachers support, okay, this part is unique to the English language. We need to spend some extra time on this with the students. So it really is, I mean, it's wonderful for all readers, but especially struggling readers and English learners.
Thank you.
Mohammed.
So for, you mentioned DLI. Can you de-abbreviate that one, please?
Yes, I apologize. Dual immersion.
Okay.
Dual language immersion. I knew I was missing a letter there.
You're good, you're good. So is there going to be like a specialized teachers who will be assigned to students whose English is not their language? I mean, well, I'm talking more like a refugee community, for example, that just came here to U.S., you know, and I can only imagine the challenge in that. So I don't know, because it's not going to be the same teacher that's provided to all the other students. Is that right?
Yes and no. So what we have, when a student starts in our district and the parents are filling out registration, if they indicate any other language other than English, they automatically go into our ELD instruction, which is supplementary instruction, and then they are tested on a test called the WIDA test, and it doesn't stand for anything that would make sense. It's like Wisconsin, Iowa, Delaware. It doesn't have anything to do with what it actually does. So students that are on different WIDA levels are required to have instruction that is based on their language level. So in some cases, that is the classroom teacher, and the teacher does that during small group time. In other schools, and some of it just depends on numbers, we call our new to the country students newcomers. And so there are often special groups where they are pulled out to do much more targeted English instruction and try and get them caught up beyond just the use of language. So a lot of our Title I schools in particular have designated teachers who work with our newcomer students to provide that extra hit.
Okay, thank you.
Other, Nate?
Yes. Thank you to this team and for Dr. Hall for talking about some of these questions that I had ahead of the meeting. So you know, it's been a long time since I've asked a question about you know, the teaming that takes place in schools among teachers and the PLC. And one of the questions I have just looking through the report is just relative to how students might be engaged in their own progress monitoring and data review. I know that's a huge indicator of success in a number of different you know, scholarly articles, or even John Hattie talks about that quite a bit. So I know there's a lot. This is very specific to professional development of teachers, but is there still any room to have students progress monitor their own work and their own data, as well as celebrate their successes?
Absolutely. Do we want to? So one of the things that happens when the letters go home is that it does, in fact, say to students and families, you know, this is your letter. And what many teachers will do is then also have kids journal that. And then as they take their middle of year and end of year assessment, they're watching that growth. And if they're progress monitoring in between that too, then they can also do that, which is also a great opportunity for them to graph or bar graph or do some other kind of sense-making literacy strategies like that. But absolutely, we are, you know, I look at you quoting Hattie and everything. I mean, that's, but that idea of making it transparent where students are and what they know and where they need to go is, in fact, a very well-researched strategy for helping students become metacognitive about their own learning. And there are some schools that we go into and they have their data wall, and every class has their data up. This is our current average, and other schools where they're keeping that maybe personally, internally in a journal and looking at some of those things. It's an area we can always improve in as we work with students to understand their own growth, but it is an area that we take really seriously.
Awesome. I appreciate that, and again, just appreciate the report that you provided to us ahead of time. I loved all the descriptions that you had for the various tiers, you know, 1, 2, and 3, and the focus on our special education students. And their IEPs and how that plays into the types of interventions that they're receiving. So thank you for that level of detail and all the work you put into this.
Thank you. Yeah, I love this presentation. Thank you. I think anything that really focuses on the high technical skills of our teachers is impressive. And thank you for the support. I think the board supports this work and supports our teachers. So thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for the opportunity to present, and I just am so lucky to have such brilliant people in my department because it makes me look good. So thank you to both of them.
Thanks for being brilliant.
Thank you.
Superintendent, did you want to say something? Really
No,
quickly?
I did it. Thank you all for your presentation.
Can I add one more just really quick thing? I overlooked my little notes. So in our district, we have 564 participants in the letters training, which I think is really amazing. We were initially estimated to have 400 with our K3, and with the non-K3 group of 4 through 6 paras and administrators, we are 564. So that is an incredible amount of learning that we are going to be doing over the next 2 years.
We appreciate our teachers and our administrators in supporting that. So we really do have a talented group of people out in our schools. So thank you.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. In May of 2020, the board adopted a sustainability resolution which included at this time, October of 2021, that we would look to adopt a sustainability plan that would be the direction or the plan for getting us toward those sustainability goals set in that sustainability resolution. And to that end, we need to study what that plan looks like. And we have Paul Schulte here, who's leading that team, and I'd like to invite him and his team to the table. Superintendent Allen, is there something you want to start with that discussion?
Yeah, and would anybody like a hard copy of the executive summary while we're visiting? I just happen to have a few.
You provided some light reading for us, Paul.
Just a little.
President Ford, you tasked me with it. I'm just stepping up to the assignment that we were given. Thank you, sir. But President Ford, you are 100% accurate. It is anything but light reading, so we apologize. Good to be with you tonight. I welcome and encourage a fluid discussion, and so folks, if you get an epiphany and want to jump in, please. That actually will help me be more proficient at answering your questions. Just to piggyback off of the opening comments, do want to recognize that we're here on assignment from you. We had a celebration in 2020 to adopt this resolution, which was very aggressive, very in-depth, and quite significant. And embedded in that was the task to have the Sustainability Task Force formed by October of last year, October 1st, and we reported on the formation of that. And in the light reading, there's a list of everybody that was on that. There's about 25 members on the committee, school member, staff members, community members, the utility members. Everybody was represented. One of the most aggressive projects and groups that I've ever been associated in my 39 years of education. And then,
do you want to introduce Greg?
Oh, I'm so sorry, Greg. I get so excited. I'm gonna let Greg. This is the man. This is the man that has the genesis of this project. So, Greg, please.
My name's Greg Lebecci.
Got to give us more than that.
And Greg is the energy resource manager. And if you go to the first page of the executive summary, the first bullet on the history of leadership over the years, below Dr. Gatson's note, is 2009 when we hired Greg. And so I think this is somewhat of a celebration for his efforts and to see this being realized. And so we we honor and thank Greg for his undying work, and maybe when it wasn't as supported as it is now. So he's been a great source of support. But anyways, we were tasked with bringing to the board no later than October 1st on 2021 an action plan addressing the following areas, which we'll talk about in just a bit. 9 aggressive areas that we also added one area to. We're proposing tonight that we'll go over the executive summary. Anything that you want to bring to us or ask us questions, we're very, very excited to hear them and get any feedback. In addition to that, we obviously sent the attachment with a draft of the plan. It's a very comprehensive document. It's about 100 pages. Lots of pictures, though.
I was going to say that.
There's some good pictures in there, so it's not exactly 100 pages. And what we're asking, and we would say humbly, based on the work of this committee, is that document's about 98% to 99% done. But we welcome lots of different eyes if we've missed something or there's something that you're really passionate about. But I would suggest humbly that please do not try to blow it up. It's been a lot of work and a lot of effort from a lot of different resources and expertise. Okay. So there it is. We have the sustainability plan. You can see some of the highlights and great work that has been done. And again, I want to recognize this board for taking what I consider a very aggressive and also substantial. You're pioneers throughout the field of education by taking this initiative. I will caution you that there's a lot of heavy lifting to be had and a lot of work to be done. And that plan comprehends, goes through that significantly. I'll go ahead to the next slide. So the resolution, again, was adopted, and basically the two big lifts are we want to be 100% renewable by 2030. We are cautiously optimistic that that is a doable area, a doable goal. And then perhaps a little bit more challenging is to be carbon neutral by 2040. We believe that's a more challenging lift, but we have some very good indicators and very good plans to meet that goal. You'll see there the action areas that you outlined in the. There we go. Thank you, Al. In the sustainability, and then when you get to the plan, we did add one additional one, which was transportation. We probably could have snuck it under a subcategory, but we felt like it should be brought out separately because of the impact it has, particularly on air quality in the city. And so we wanted to separate that out. It does outline on the bottom of that page the sustainability for us. There are the students. Isn't it great that we're in an educational environment and this initiative was student-led? And I can tell you that many times Greg and I had conversations about how to get the lift, and we just didn't turn to the right resource. And so we are just excited that in a community of educators that this was driven by the student-led. And I want you to understand that on our committee, the students participated the entire time. I've never been on a committee where we had well over 95% attendance. Now, I might add that technology helped to that. Zoom and really makes it nice for folks to be. But our students were there. They were very active on subcommittees. They were they did presentations. I want to back up and just kind of walk you through how the task force works. So if you look at those 9 areas, you're going to pull that back down just a little bit again now. What we did is we took the 9 areas and we took our committee and divided them into subcommittees. So we had 9 subcommittees plus the 1, so we actually ended up with 10. And they met regularly. So our whole committee met monthly. And then what we did is we divided up the 10 subcommittees, and then each group, we had about 2 or 3 every month share out their strategies and what they thought they needed to do to achieve the goal in that sub-area. And so this was very organic and very much driven by our communities. And the work was great. And one of the commitments I really felt strongly about, and Greg can attest to this and weigh into this, is we didn't want to do what I called the bake sale approach. We did not want to do something that was just very low level. We wanted to really dig in and make sure this was professional, well done, and something that we could actually do as a district. Anything to add to that, Greg?
No, we were way ahead of the game with, the work we've been doing. So it was like the golf ball was put on the tee. We know what our baseline is. We've been benchmarked. We've done a lot of things to be prepared to be in a position to show the rest of the school districts the way on this.
All right. We can keep going right to the big. So as we talk about the greenhouse gas emissions, just as a point of reference, and this is in the plan that you received, our school district, between our buildings and our transportation and all the different resources, we do add to our environment about 33,000 tons. So just let that sink in for a moment. And so as a community and as a business partner as well in the community, you can see the impact that we can make if we really get aggressive about this. And so there's three main strategies when we talk about the carbon that we're going to address. And we really believe in the next few months you're going to see us regularly about asking for some support about let's get going. Like Dr. Gatson said, we're on the move. And in this area we are. So first is the energy efficiency. And we're going to reduce the amount of energy used by the electric and natural equipment. And so just looking at the equipment we have, the envelope for the buildings, anything we can do to make our systems in every building much more efficient. Please.
Just the thing that's going to add the biggest impact to this is getting LED in all the classrooms and throughout the district. All the new schools are built with LED and providing teachers with ability to control the intensity. So that's not an equity situation right now. So this plan will drive us toward equity with that measure that is a kind of the low-hanging fruit, if you will. But that is a big piece of that energy efficiency program.
It's significant returns for becoming efficient and also decreasing costs. It's a great place to start, is with those LEDs, and you'll be hearing quite a bit about that from us in the next few months. Utility and other renewable energy, increase the amount of renewable energy in the grid, utility grid, and amount procured by the district. That's a fancy way of saying that our utilities, Rocky Mountain is committed to becoming more efficient and cleaner. So so as we tap into them, and as we continue our relationship with them, that's automatically going to make us cleaner. In addition, when we talk about the procured by the district, that's a nice way of just saying, let's put a ton of solar on top of our buildings and procure that. And so that's the next really efficient. So you have a good way of thinking of the leap and the quick start relative to the efficiency of our building is LED and solar. You're going to see a very aggressive approach from we recommend from the committee. And then finally, what I mentioned, the transportation and building electrification. That's a bigger lift, and we're going to show you this in the graph at the bottom a little bit and kind of weigh into that. It's kind of a fun little graph. We can go down to that. Just pulled out just a little bit. So one of the things that was challenging was getting our baseline, because the pandemic decreased how much we were using buildings. So we're really wrestling with how do we get the baseline. So you can see that we use the 18-19 year. Mm-hmm. We will compare it to this year as well, because we'll be getting, we have more folks back at school, and so that was interesting. But you'll see that we talked about the energy efficiency and the renewable energy and the utility. You can see that if you look at the slide there's the 33,000 tons. And look at the energy efficiency and the utility renewable energy. And look at the growth that we get. Look at how much carbon, how much greenhouse gas we take out of the environment by those two strategies. And if you look at the gray down below, that's the cost. So you have high, medium, you can see on the vertical axis. Our energy efficiency, so being the LED lights, is actually, we save money. It's a great strategy. And then when we go to the solar, you see how very thin that gray is. minimal investments. So we got great returns on those strategies. The other renewables, Greg, you want to weigh into that just a little bit? You're my expert on that.
A note I'd like to make on the utility renewable is that doesn't happen immediately. That's based on their promise and the goals that they have released, that they are committing to integrating into the mix more and more renewables, and that we all benefit from that, and certainly that's something we are happy to see them doing. But that chunk there is through 2040, so that really does get spread out. The other renewables really is just the rooftop solar that we're anticipating, and that will also reduce our cost. By every electron and every kilowatt hour we pull off the roof, it reduces the amount we have to pay to utility, obviously. So it's and it's a great educational opportunity, and I think an opportunity to engage with the STEM program and to really make it a focus of engaging students as we go down the line on that, if that's how it pans out.
So if you can if you compare the baseline on the left-hand side, the vertical left axis, you can see if we can get those three strategies that the cost is reasonable, we're making some real headways. We're decreasing our carbon footprint by about 60-70%. Then the heavy lift comes. Then what we do next? What do we do with natural gas and these type of things? Electrification is definitely the strategy that we're looking into. We will come back. You'll see in the large plan, looking at a couple private schools to test some electrifications and some what we can call sometimes a hybrid model relative to our air exchanger and things of that sort. But that is the heavy lift. With the transportation, we're doing good because we're getting grants and things of this sort. We're also looking at our fleet, our light fleet, and Alan has empowered us to look at leasing, because then we can be more reactive to the model. So as a newer technology comes out, we can trade the car in for a different car that has better efficiency. So we're looking at lots of different strategies there. But this chart's very, very telling, and I want to assure you, and I'm going to finish up, that we are addressing all 10 areas. But to get to the carbon neutral and to get to the renewable, we have to concentrate primarily on our buildings. But the other things of education, all these things, we're 100% vested. The committee has a plan for those, but we're spending a lot of time on these areas because of the impact to get to those two heavy lifts that you've asked us. Go ahead, Greg.
And just a note on transportation, I'm really proud to be associated with this school district and the aggressive approach to transportation. We have 4 electric buses, as you know, with 4 more on order, and a 200 kilowatt system on the canopy, which more than doubled what we have on 7 schools right now. So in one shot, we more than doubled, and with the charging stations, it really is a nice jump start.
And please make a note, we haven't got it out to you officially, but October 21st we'll be doing the ribbon cutting out at the new transportation barn with and the solar array and the electrical buses, so that'll be a great event. And it's kind of great that it segues into this lift. And finally, on the last page, just wanted to bring up is what we found when we took the 9 plus the 1 category that we added into those action areas, is that it kind of, as we were writing the plan, it morphed into 6 strategies for success. And so as you read the plan, these are the areas you want to keep track of. And we've mentioned renewable already, building efficiency, but then and transportation and electrification. But then those 2 heavy and most important lifts. I'm so committed and proud of our team that we want to educate students. We want to create citizens that when they leave the Salt Lake City School District, they love their environment, they're committed to keeping us healthy and making those choices as citizens to be great community members. And so that's embedded very much in that education. And then in the learning environment, we were, again, nationally we were ahead of the curve. We make these presentations, and when all the sales folks were calling us up about using their disinfectant and that it's clean and safe. When I would share with them the specs that I think I've shared with the board a number of times on what we use, they would just hang up and say, "You guys, you got it under control." We use safe cleansers. We are head on the pest control, those type of things. We just need to probably make it more systematic. But those areas are great when we talk about our learning environment. So the list I need from you, I need you to read that document, get anything back to you, because my goal is by the end of this week to have a final document that you can read for about 10 days, and we're asking for your vote in the next, I believe it'll be in the discussion, and hope you'll move it to the action agenda, and that it'll be approved, so then we can get going and get to work. So now I'm ready for questions.
Well,
Greg, go ahead, please.
One more note on education, because it's down at the bottom, but I think it should be at the top, because there's such an opportunity here to make this part of the education process. There's such a crossover between disciplines that can come out of this concept. I mean, what's going on in society today, water conservation, with air quality. I mean, it all gets wrapped up in this, and it's a real opportunity that I hope we can grasp on. I'm so happy to work with Candace. And she was very active on the task force, and we had the APES,
I have the list
Advanced
here.
Placement Environmental Science teachers from all 3 high schools participated, and that was wonderful. So anyway, I don't want to shortchange that part at the bottom.
I was going to give Candace Penrod a shout out for her work in the education. We had Candace there, we had Tyler Barnes, James Yappius, Crystal King, the science teacher at West High, Robert Durham, science teacher at East High, Cody Colvin, the principal now at Hawthorne, and Greg. We had lots of education.
Don't forget Sandra Rundia.
Yeah, Sandra, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for including that
With
in
the equity.
in what you have on the agenda too. It was fun to read through who you have on those committees.
I think about the social studies in this, the politics around climate change, how it's impacting our world. I think about the math, the savings that go into this, and the money that the district is investing, and how that money over years will yield dividends for our district, the literacy that's involved, and of course you already said the science. So the education value for this is is multiplied. So this investment by the board, it has benefits, cost benefits, learning benefits. I can't thank you all enough.
Benefits, yeah, there's lots of ways of benefits. I'm sure board members have questions. I'll just kind of echo first Paul's suggestion that we bring this back on discussion. In the meantime, for board members to read, it's like you said, a 100-page document about with pictures. I've speed read through it, but as Christy pointed out, we were busy this weekend, and we maybe don't have as much time to delve into it as we'd like. So you might expect questions from board members about the plan over the next couple of weeks, and then we will discuss and potentially move it to action. It depends on how those questions go and how the board feels comfortable about that. So recognizing that board members may not have time for in-depth questions at this point, there's probably some questions that
and
we
with
can
Alan's
ask.
permission, I wanted to be very clear to say that I'll stay in the evening if we want to do small groups or one-on-one. Bearsley, come out to what I affectionately call the South 40, and we will sit you down and walk through if you have to. I know that's in position to come out, but we want to make sure that we will make ourselves available for any discussion if it would be more effective one-on-one or in person as well.
I applaud this work. You've done really good work. Mohammed, you had a question, and then over here.
Thank you. Seeing what the presentation you have given, and I already see it happening, just seeing the new generation, they are so committed to a cleaner environment. I sincerely appreciate that. One thing that always keeps coming to my mind when I go to schools is lack of trees. I mean, trees, trees are the soul of oxygen. We all know that. We need that. And I think if we can reduce the asphalt spaces we have at schools and transform that into more like a greenery, areas at school, it actually is going to help a lot. Because when it's hot and sunny, you are on the grass, it's better. You stand out there on asphalt waiting for your kid to come out. You're 10 degrees hotter than when you were on the grass. And so as many trees as we can get would be fantastic around the schools and in the school grounds as well.
We are already doing that. I've committed $20,000 from my discretionary fund for trees. Greg is working. Remind me of the group.
Tree Utah.
And so we are aggressively already going at. Isn't that great? A low-hanging, inexpensive strategy that we can jump on today. And so we have our grounds crew looking at and evaluating, and we're getting after that immediately. There's nothing to wait for. We don't need to approve a plan or anything. We can just start planting trees.
Yes, I'll come
So
plan too
we're
if
there.
you need to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Catherine, go ahead.
Thank you. This is really great. And Greg, I recognize your name from the reports you've sent us all these years.
Which is so nice.
On how much we've earned from recycling.
Thank
so
you.
I just want you to know that I've been paying attention, and I've wondered who this Ledeco is actually. So thank you for coming. So, and that's been fun, and you always have a very positive voice when you send those emails. I see, I think on page 37, and this report has a lot of pictures, so it's not actually 100 pages. It's
Correct.
Not text at least. But on page 37, I see that your plan for solar, which I think is terrific, and it's what we should be doing in Salt Lake City for sure. Is there any way we can also put in any windmills? Are there any areas? I know Capitol Hill is pretty windy, for example. Are there any areas in our district that we could put in smallish windmills?
The honest answer is we haven't even entertained that conversation. We can float it out to our consultant, and also the utility companies and this type.
We could put them on the tops of buildings, for example.
Haven't even really entertained that at all.
They make it's called a vertical axis, which spins this way instead of that way. And those are less noisy and require a little bit less wind. So that is something that is worthy of taking a look at.
And I think there are some areas in our district that are windier than others, and it might be worth it to do that.
And the nice thing, Catherine, on that is that in the back of the plan, in the body of the plan, we haven't embedded all the strategies. So it's very easy for us to embed that strategy and say, oh, let's not forget this. So that'll be, if you make a note of that, Greg, that'll be an easy addition to our addendum that lists the comprehensive. There's over 50 strategies from all the different subgroups. And so we kind of pulled out the best, so it's easy to add that in to remind us.
Yeah, so I'll just make a note
You
here.
got a note. It's on the.
Thank you.
You bet.
Also, I have a employee from one of my schools that is really interested in food waste, and as we know, that adds a lot of carbon in transportation, for food, in the packaging of food. A lot of oils and carbon is created, and she had a great program. She just sent me a letter last week where uneaten and unopened food items could be put in one of the share bins at their school, and then students who are still hungry could get them, and then they would also donate them to the food pantry. Unfortunately, after when COVID hit, that's not been a possibility, even though we know that COVID is typically not
touched.
So we're wondering whether, she's wondering when that can possibly be put back into play, and they were actually thinking about modeling it and pushing it out to other schools. It solves a bunch of problems. It was great. So I'd love to have them get an answer, and I'm happy to forward her email on to
That'd be
you,
great.
both of you, as it's because it's a really great idea. The other thing she wanted to know is that hot lunch, she says, hot food, that they're right now they're throwing away the hot food leftovers, and she asks, why can't faculty and staff have the leftover hot lunch? And so she's wondering, is that a possibility rather than having faculty and staff pay and they're throwing away multiple servings. Why can't they have that? So I'd love to see
Sure.
us have a policy
We can do some
on leftovers
investigation.
for hot lunch. And I mean that's assuming the teachers want to eat those pieces of pizza. And yeah, that's right. But it seems like that some of them may indeed want to do that. And I'd love to see us have a policy so we waste as little
Minimize.
food as possible, which solves a whole bunch of problems. It seems to me.
We also just need, since school lunch is a federal program, we have to follow any federal
right.
regulations as well.
So that is true. So that's the trick of it. And so the question is there a policy when does the food have to be thrown away? If
That
it's
we'll
Look
dig
into
up
those.
all those issues.
Yeah, that'd be
We'll
great.
get after
You,
all
you
those.
should have heard the students engage with Kelly Orton on this topic, because the students get it and they see it, and there are all kinds of legal reasons, and Kelly has to take a deep breath and explain the reason, but there is room, and with the students they really did work Kelly pretty good in that committee.
And there's always a place to knock on the door and say, hey, can we pilot X? Can we
Right.
pilot Y? So just being told no is not always the end of the dialogue, right? Say, hey, who's in charge of this? Who do we knock on the door of? Who do we talk to our representatives? Things like that, and say, hey, can we try something?
Yeah, I love
And right
that.
now during the pandemic and stuff, it's a great time to knock on people's doors and say, can we try something? So,
Thank you.
yeah.
I think this is a great presentation and represents a ton of work. 33,000 tons, is that right?
Yep.
And I really appreciate the hard work you're doing on it.
And one other thing to that note, we are piloting right now with Wasatch Resource Recovery, a facility up in North Salt Lake, where from Wasatch Elementary they're picking up our food waste and they take it to this facility, and in that biodigester they capture the methane, and they have an agreement with Dominion Energy, and they are at full capacity. They could provide the heating natural gas for the heating needs of 20,000 homes. So it's a little bit of a cost, but it's so much a better place to send it than to feed the seagulls.
And that's captured in the plan as a success. It's one of the success breakouts that we have in the plan.
Thank you. And the last thing is that I'd love to see us continue to invite the team of students to events like the ribbon cutting.
Okay.
And a lot of those kids were West students, and
Yep.
I would be happy to try to get their email addresses.
Oh,
and
we have
forward
them all.
to-
We've got
have
them.
all those
Oh,
email addresses.
they've
Okay.
been engaged the whole way through. They've been
Okay,
engaged.
perfect.
They're still engaged in the
Good.
editing and everything.
Perfect.
They haven't backed
They
off
haven't
one
gone away.
iota.
Good. I'm so
And we
glad.
have representatives from all three high schools, and if they can be there, they'll be there. They're the best. We
And
Some
just
of them are
enjoy
in
it.
college away, but
Yep.
thank you.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank
And
you
those
very
three teachers are at each
Mhm.
high school are involved with those students, and we'll make sure that they know and they're invited as well.
But just to speak to the students that went away, we replaced them with additional students, so it didn't dissipate. The number is still steady, so it's great. And then if we can always coordinate when they come back, we're happy to look into that as well.
Thank
If they're
you.
on fall break or something like that. Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you so much, Paul, Greg. Really appreciate your work in this presentation.
Thank you for your time.
We'll see you soon. The last study item is about a board retreat. As you know, that our board policy asks, or you typically have a summer planning retreat, and that planning retreat is designed to use that time for us to come together as a board and set priorities and plan for the upcoming school year. We didn't have that retreat over the summer, which I think is largely because of the busyness that we had and needing a break and having a new superintendent. But we would like to have that retreat now, and it needs to be the board's retreat. And so I would like to use this time for us to set some goals and expectations for how we'd like to utilize the time, and even what amount of time we want to use. And I know that to begin with, you received an email from Dr. Buendia about timing and a location. Even that is something I want to make sure that the board is comfortable with. This is our retreat. But we do need to be prepared for it, and we do need to give staff time to prepare for it, for us to identify what our priorities are and how we want to move forward. So thank you for being here, Dr. Johnson-White and Dr. Buendia. Superintendent, do you want to start this part of the conversation?
Most definitely. So I've asked Dr. Johnson-White and Dr. Buendia to take point on really trying to anticipate the board's needs and handle the logistics so you don't have to worry about those things. But we do need input and guidance from you on what you would like. Some of the suggestions that we were thinking about is the first 2 hours of the meeting to have an opportunity for the board and cabinet to interact. And just hear a little bit more from the board on what your expectations are. Do some team building activities and engage in a few more of the Kagan strategies so that you are able to see that. After those 2 hours, we were suggesting that cabinet leaves because we need to get to the board business. And so with that, I thought it was important because we should be reviewing the roles and responsibilities of the board annually. And I thought that was something that we could make sure we bring to the retreat and have an opportunity to have that level of discussion. We've got to define our board goals and priorities. So some time needs to be spent on that. And then looking at those big picture topics, things like strategic planning, giving some guidance and direction for the student achievement plan, some of those things. And of course, it won't be complete, but it gets the ball rolling so that I know what it is that you all are expecting and I'm able to direct staff to get this work going on your behalf. And then having an opportunity to do some wrap up, some closing thoughts, some closing conversation prior to us departing for the day. But I'm open to suggestion. As you said, Dr. Ford, is the board's retreat. Those were just some ideas that we had to help kind of focus the conversation and give you some ideas of what we were thinking could be accomplished in that day.
So I'm hearing interaction with cabinet, some discussion of roles and responsibilities, discussion of board priorities, and some strategic planning. I want to know what board members are expecting in this retreat and how you would like to see us utilize our time. We're looking at a Saturday.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Buendia, for putting out a schedule. I just want to make sure everybody's comfortable with the day and location. It's November 14th, is that right? 13th.
I am personally looking to, I had expressed that the morning was a little difficult for me. I am working to try to make that work. I'm particularly interested in the interaction with the cabinet as the newest board member. I think that's something that's really important. I don't have all of those relationships that the other board members do, so I'm working to try to make that happen.
Yeah, and I, as you can imagine, everybody's busy, so I apologize that we couldn't make it happen. And as you said, the 13th, I just sent the caterer some potential dates, and I sent her the wrong date. I'll have to make sure to let her know.
We've been dealing with a lot of dates lately.
Yes,
so,
I'm sure.
With a lot of different people. So, and that said, it is important. I know it's a high priority for Board Member Williams, but it's a high priority for the board that he be there as well. So, let's make sure we're working to
just about there.
Okay. So that's a Saturday. How does the board feel about that? Yeah.
I really appreciate this. First of all, the Dr. Buendia's ability to move things around, because I was actually out of town for one of those days that she suggested, so I appreciate that. And for this advance warning and the accommodation of all board member schedules, because we haven't always done that in the past, so I really appreciate that.
We do our best. Thank you, Catherine. Other comments about how you'd like to see that time used? My personal expectation is that we will have time to be together, build relationships, but that strategic planning and setting the priorities for what we want to see in our as our focus, that high-level student outcome goals that we've been working on, is really important to me. I also want to have a conversation, I think, about our meetings themselves and making sure that we're following a format that the board is comfortable with. So perhaps the suggestion would be that we use that time to review our board policies and board handbook. I know the policies go through the subcommittee, but we have a request to look at the handbook, and I think that that's important. So I just want to do that in the best possible way as well. Christy?
Thank you so much for the effort that you have put into trying to put this together with all of our different schedules, as we've already said. So I think that, I'm always open to different formats, of how we've done this. I mean, we've been all over the page, over the last decade, of how we try and put this conversation together. I do think that it's important that we stay focused on right now what our two goals are for, for the school year, but yet also tie that into hopefully what we're looking towards putting together with our student achievement plan. I think that the student achievement plan is a 5-year plan that the board needs to be engaged in, and so we need to be able to talk about the goals, how did they go, have an evaluation of that, and then move that forward. So there has to be some sort of wrap up of that, but also looking at what is it that we want to have as a part of our agenda so that we can continue to keep the conversation going around the student achievement plan. I'm hoping that when we end our meeting that we have a clear idea that the board is given direction of what topics we want to see on the agenda, because I think that that's important, that the board has input and gives direction to the superintendent, the president and vice president about what our agenda should look like for the remainder of the year, and then into next summer, when we would again repeat the process. So I think continuity is important, that we do that. The last thing I think that has to be a part of the conversation is the budget, and making sure that our resources that we have are tied to those goals and tied to the work that we want to see done. So, I appreciate the time. I think it's always, a very relaxed atmosphere. I don't want it to feel stressful. I think that we've had it here, we've had it at different places. Obviously, we have to stay within our geographical boundaries of our district. You've pinpointed one. What's the place called again?
The Thomas S. Monson Center, just up the street.
It's just up the street, right?
South Temple.
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh, it's on E, and is that the one on D and South Temple?
In South Temple, right? So, I think that all of us are taking a Saturday, so we want to be able to, be really focused, with the conversation that we have. I agree with Melissa. I think it's a time that we need to look at our handbook. I think it's important for us to make sure that we're looking at our policies, and so that would mean that we would need to have a discussion around, what policies we might want to see going forward too. I think that that's something that we haven't done for a couple of years, is to add policies onto that agenda, which would help give our committee some direction. So I'm sure that there'll be some other things organically that will come up, over the next couple of months, and I hope that we'll be able to have a very organic agenda. I understand, Superintendent, that you want to be prepared, but I also think there might be some things that come up that we're like, oh, we should have thought of that, or probably had this part of it, this part of it. So anyway, that's just some off the top of my head thoughts.
Well, I love this because already it seems like we're going to have more than one board retreat. So because you have a day and you want to be able to deal with topics, and like you are saying, 30 minutes here at the study session, we try to address the topics, but I want you all to be able to address them and in depth and not be rushed. So we can make the day as long as you all are willing to be there to get some of this in, or we can split this into a couple of retreats so that we have that 8-hour day or what have you, and we come back for another 8 hours. 'Cause this is a lot to try to address in depth in one 8-hour retreat.
So Melissa, can I ask a question then to follow up with what Dr. Gadsden says? What is our homework? Are we going to be providing you a list of topics that we would like to talk about? Or are we going to discuss a list of topics when we all get together and then to, kind of weed those? I mean, what exactly is our obligation over the next couple of months before we meet in this first retreat?
That's a good question. I think my experience has told me that these retreats are opportunities for us to bring those and discuss there.
Exactly, yeah.
But I think there might be some efficiency that comes with providing those lists beforehand so that we've thought about it and presented them so that we've all seen them so that we can have a more efficient discussion. But I still think we need to discuss everybody's priorities in that meeting, because I do want to make sure that the reflection is that it's everybody's priorities.
So maybe a suggestion then, I think there are some priorities that we have. I think we identified some of those priorities when we were talking with Business Administrator Kersley in our last meeting around the bonding, which then brought up, the demographic study, brought up, the census, our boundaries. So could we possibly have maybe 2 categories? What are the priority categories that we need to address, immediately? And then what are those priorities that we need to have, longer conversations with that would really do look like study session topics versus, a report? So does that make sense?
Perfect. And I'd really like to come out of this retreat with a good plan for the rest of our board meetings for the year and what we want to prioritize. And one thing we discussed was looking at previous board meetings over this last year and kind of identifying what things the board members have brought up as priorities. And you've named some of them, but just making sure that we're focusing on what the board has been talking about as well. And so hopefully you'll hear that echoed, and then other ideas come up too. I want to make sure that this is a comprehensive process, but then that we identify things that we can actually tackle and actually make progress on as well. I want to make sure everybody feels like, their voice is heard in that conversation.
And a suggestion of something that I'd like to encourage the board to do is we have many priorities, right? And we should. But along with what Board Member Sweat is saying, some of our priorities are in the study phase. And so we categorize them as study. So it's information that staff is gathering. The board is kind of giving us homework. We'll be providing those reports to you over time, but they're not ready to be implemented yet. They're studying. Those are things like if our state standards are changing and it's going to impact curriculum, we have to purchase textbooks, things like that. That would be in the study category. We're exploring. So study or exploration. Then we have those things that are almost ready for implementation, but we're looking at resourcing and things like that. How are we going to make sure that we are able to implement with fidelity? That's another category. And then there are things that are currently being implemented that the board wants updates and that we're monitoring. And you want to see if there's a return on investment and others. So I'd like to suggest maybe look at those things that the board priorities that you want us to study and explore and bring information to you. Those things that you've already approved that have not been fully implemented but are getting there. And things that are currently implemented that you want us to keep our eye on and keep you updated on how they're going.
And we have generated a list not too long ago. It wouldn't have included all board members, but maybe we can forward that list around. And I'm sure that some of the things would fit in each of the categories that Dr. Gatzman said. But we've sent those things to you as leaders, and it'd be great to see that list again, and to forward that to our board members so they know our new board
Are
members.
you talking about the list we generated in that year and a half ago retreat?
Yeah, yes, and then I think there was another list that we sent to you too, that when you asked what we wanted to cover that year, last year.
Right, that's the list I'm talking about, yeah. Okay, thank you. Nate?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I just want to applaud the board for the work that we've already done in this realm. I know we spent some pretty good quality time in January working on this stuff, in particular roles and responsibilities, specifically diving into what our guardrails and boundaries are as board members, as a governance body, versus the day-to-day boots on the ground work that the administration and all the way down to our teachers are responsible for. Like, those are really good discussions I thought we had. While they were drafts, I think there were some pretty specific examples that we saw out of that time and that retreat that we had, that were really specific towards equity and student achievement. And I really like what you're saying, Dr. Gatzman, about how do our board agendas and the board priorities that we identify, how do they point to and relate to progress monitoring? How are we measuring for success as a board relative to the work that you're responsible for, top down? So those things really speak to me. I would love to revisit those draft goals that we identified collectively. And certainly the student achievement plan. I think that's something that we definitely have to engage in on, knowing that we extended that a year, waiting for the process and hiring you to take place. Let's see here. And I think that team building piece is critical. We've been through a lot in this last year, as we all know, and I think there's an opportunity for us to continue to build relationships and a bond, amongst ourselves as a board, and certainly between yourself and our cabinet as well, your cabinet. But to me, I really want us to get specific about how do we measure and progress monitor the goals that we identify and the priorities, and how do the priorities that this board identifies relate to those goals. I think that's just a matter of efficiency in my book, and would love to continue to build on a lot of what we discussed in January.
Other feedback?
Jenny and I were sharing the same. Floating in the cloud. What's going on?
I'm sorry. I thought a retreat was like supposed to be based around fun.
Yes.
Topic, I'm all like, oh, it's a board meeting.
Golf, yeah.
So
We can do that on Sunday.
I will come prepared for a board meeting at our retreat.
And it definitely would not be a board meeting, but the process should help us as we have board meetings to make it more fun.
So can I just implement then that around your guys' whatever you guys are planning, try and implement something fun to where we're actually, kind of let our guard down so we could actually see each other in this light, because the light that we are currently in the board meeting right now, I feel will transfer over to this retreat.
We got that. Fun with an exclamation point.
Yeah, so
Jenny just wants to beat us at golf.
we're going to go golfing. So I gave you a little taste of a Kagan structure today. And that's more for academic decision-making, conversation, process, reasons, right? So I have team building. That's the beauty about Kagan, is there's the team building, there's the collaboration building, there's all these different facets to it. So the first 2 hours are fun activities.
Yeah.
And so just like silly stuff that you can giggle about and you'll be interacting with one another.
I'm not sure that that's exactly what Jenny was that's it.
A little, kind of mambo dance or something. Anyway, so
I guess
I'm just giving you guys a hard time.
I would say that our USBA conferences are great team building and sort of fun too. That as they came.
Yeah.
And I know that we were lucky that all of our board members were invited, and 6 of us were able to attend, and I think it's a great team building thing. I really hope that in the future for our USBA things in January that we can also have superintendent and business manager Kearsley come too. I think that it's really a wonderful opportunity for us to build our team, to have professional development and opportunities provided by USBA, and also to to have the opportunity to talk about things in a way that doesn't violate open meeting law, but to hear that kind of information. And I think that also happens at NSBA.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that we are taking the opportunity to avail ourselves of those those conferences and things like that when we can.
Yeah, I just want to note too, so the retreat will be a noticed public meeting as we will be all there as a quorum. So, and
It's gonna be televised. I'm just kidding.
so there will be no mamba dancing or whatever it's called.
well, we can do a Lego stick. That'd be interesting to see people's flexibility.
Not mine.
I think this will be a good opportunity, and I appreciate you
We're planning
both
a
for
lot of
taking
fun,
that.
good food.
It will be in a relaxed atmosphere along the way, not throughout the whole program, but you'll have some opportunities to interact with one another so that we can build relationships, get to know one another better, and establish those relationships. And then we'll have opportunities to address the issues that you have, maybe not in complete detail, but to let you know where we are and what our focus is.
Team building is important.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? I would just suggest to board members to reach out to the superintendent or to Nate or I or to these two if you've got suggestions, so we can work together to be prepared to make this a really positive retreat. Well, thank you for your feedback, board members. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see. Before we adjourn the public session of the meeting, I'd like to ask the superintendent if you have a few updates for us.
Not necessarily updates, but I just want to make sure that our public understand that we've sent out a survey where we're trying to elicit information related to the town hall meetings that each of our board members will be sponsoring. I want to apologize that one of the questions, the very first question, was not as clear to our public as it needed to be. There was some emotions and questions from some of our special ed parents that the question did not include our special ed parents. I now know that there has been a history with surveys in our district where parents are now in a position, parents of students with disabilities are in a position to kind of be suspect and have concern about surveys that we sent out. We have rewritten that question so that it's more clear in what we were asking. We were asking parents to identify programs and services outside of our standard program offering, like general ed, special ed, English language development, that they find value in, so that we kind of collect that information and see where our parents are. And that included extracurricular activities, the arts and STEM programs that we partner in to provide in after school and classes during the day. And so it's more of those voluntary and optional programs and services that our district provides. We want to know what our families feel are of value. And so I want to publicly apologize that that question was not as clear as it needed to be, but based on the feedback that we got, we did clarify that question and update the survey. Thank you.
Thanks for taking care of that, Superintendent Getson. Can we, as board members, receive everything that the general public, or that our constituencies receive? I used to until this year because I had a student, but now
Right.
my student's graduated, and I would really like to make sure that all the board members receive everything that goes out to the entire school parent community.
Most definitely, and I took care of that today. I thought board members were receiving it because I thought you all received the newsletter and all of that when it comes out. So I thought you all received all communication that our parents receive. But I will make sure that that happens, and I do apologize for that as well.
Thank you, Superintendent. Okay, before we adjourn the meeting, at the beginning of this meeting, we had a closed executive session for the purpose of discussing litigation and character and competence, in which we weren't able to complete before the open meeting started. And so I would like to entertain a motion to re-enter a closed executive session for the purpose of discussing litigation and character and competence of an individual.
Before you do that, Melissa, can we have a few minutes to do what we usually do with our, I have a couple things that I wanted to ask.
Yeah.
So if other people may have them too.
Okay.
But I have a couple things.
Yeah, can I just thank you for bringing that up, Catherine. So we took this agenda from a previous study session agenda, and I didn't notice until too late that it didn't have that board member report on it. So yes, I'm really happy to do a quick update, and I would also take feedback from the board if that's something we want to just make sure we add to every agenda. So thank you, Catherine. If board members wanted to do a report, we'll start with Catherine and do that.
Mm-hmm. Great. First of all, I know that that I'm interested in a report on the virtual academy from some of the issues that were brought up. So I hope that at our next session we can get a pretty detailed report on those things that were brought up at the beginning of our meeting.
Repeat
on the virtual
that, please.
academy.
Update on the virtual academy.
If we can get an update on the virtual academy and a report on what's happening with that. Second, one thing that was highlighted at USDA in a report done by the Granite School District is that they have a refugee integration program, and it sounded really wonderful. We used to have a great program like that, and unfortunately 2 to 3 years ago it was canceled for mysterious reasons, but it was a wonderful, wonderful program. And I'm hoping that I don't know that we can put it together, but really quickly, my understanding is that we're going to get, that West High alone was expecting to get, say, around 30 Afghan refugee students. And I hope that if we cannot put it together, that we could talk to Granite or maybe another district that has one, but since Granite is so close, about contracting with them to ask our students whether they can go to that program.
I'll monitor my airtime. So we used to have the program, and then we had a decline in the number of students who were being resettled in our district boundaries. And so we couldn't sustain it because you have to have, in order to justify. So what we did instead is create a network of systems to support students in their school. And the intent is supposed to be for schools to provide an orientation period. And so that was something back when I was over ALS that probably needs to be revisited. There was an entire plan for how that works for newcomers coming in, because while Granite's program has been able to survive, personally, there's nothing better than to provide the services at the student's home, boundary school.
Can I
which
just,
is
can I just interrupt this conversation? Thank you, Dr. Buendia, and thank you so much for bringing it up, Dr. Kennedy. I think this is something we need to discuss.
Yeah.
We have students coming who are refugee students. What I would suggest is if
Yep.
the board supports this conversation, we will spend time on it.
But it will have to be quick
Soon.
because
Soon.
that's right.
For
And
sure,
so
soon.
we have these students coming in.
But it's
and-
not a notice conversation
Right.
tonight,
I
and so
love
I don't
the
want to
idea.
put you on the
I will
spot.
say, let me say this. We have had 1 to 2 families that have been enrolled. We have not, Dr. Gutierrez is notified by the Department of Workforce Services and their service providers. So I'm not sure who's getting that information because we have not received information from the Department of Workforce Services or any of, they're saying, what they typically say is they're coming into Salt Lake, but not when we drill down, it's not our district.
Okay,
And so-
and though you can discuss that later, I just would throwing the idea out.
Great
that
idea.
we
And
can
I
maybe-
just want to make sure that then I
Right.
have, through our process, support from the board for that conversation. Thank
we're,
you.
We're not talking about our SEC meetings, which is great tonight. That I just have one more comment about
this format that originally it looked like it was a permanent decision, but you're saying we're trying it out.
Mhm.
So it seems to me that if we're thinking about having to have 2 retreats, which we may need, that probably we need to have regular meetings and study sessions before, like we have. So we use that hour before our regular meeting to have a study session, and then we have our regular meeting. Because if we have so much to do that we should continue. My feeling is we need to continue.
2 business meetings with a study session before.
That's
each one.
right, because we have enough material to cover to do study sessions before, and that we shouldn't be just retasking one of our meetings to a study session.
Okay. Thank you, Catherine. I'm hoping for feedback on this format from everybody. Even the statement I read at the beginning was taken from a statement that used to be read before board meetings. So really trying to honor what the board process has been, but these do need to be our meetings, so I appreciate the feedback. Any other board members want to report? Christy?
So maybe just to talk a little bit about the format, since you are asking for feedback. Where my concern comes is that if we have our traditional meeting schedule, then it ends up being that our agendas become too long. And we're here for too long. And then, the work is not productive. My worry about having a study session and a business meeting, then where do you put the closed session, which is what we've been needing for a number of meetings. And so although I hear what Board Member Kennedy is saying, I think that we have to take into consideration that we have multiple board members that work and have jobs. And so we can't expect them to keep coming earlier and earlier and earlier in the day when they have obligations with their families and with their jobs. So hopefully we'll be able to figure out a balance. Maybe, in the month of October we have, a business meeting and a study session, and then in November it's 2 business meetings, depending on what we need to calendar. But I will say that I appreciate not being here at midnight. That's not something that I want to see our board continue to practice. And so we need to be careful about what those agendas are loaded up to be. But at the same time, it was very obvious to me tonight that the conversation with Dr. Buendia and Dr. Gutierrez, we needed more time than 30 minutes. So finding a balance, which we all learned this past weekend, is a word that is actually really hard to achieve. How do you define balance? So I would just say that maybe what we could do is discuss this, and maybe it is a monthly thing, that instead of just saying, nope, this is what our format's going to be, that you come to the board and we say, okay, this is what this next month's going to look like, or the next 2 months, and then we can, so that everyone has the adjustment. But I just don't think that it's reasonable right now where we have 4 to 5 board members that have jobs, and we can't expect them to be here at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
I completely agree with that. And I would never suggest being
No, I
here.
know you didn't.
That's
So,
feedback.
You didn't
yeah,
suggest
it was
that,
just
but I'm appreciative
to add
of the
to the
feedback.
perspective,
And
yeah.
we do want these to be the board's meetings, so I appreciate the feedback. Any other board reports? Christy, was that everything you wanted to share? Okay. No, I appreciate that. All right. Thank you. And what I'd like to do is entertain a motion to enter a closed executive session for the purpose of discussing litigation, negotiations and/or property, and character, professional competence, or physical, mental health of an individual. Anybody want to entertain that motion?
President Ford, I move that we re-enter closed session to discuss character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual and/or deployment of security personnel, devices, systems, and character and competence at 8:58 p.m. September 21st, 2020.
I'll second.
Okay. Just to make sure I heard, did you also include litigation?
And litigation.
Okay. So a motion by Nate and seconded by Christy. Let's go ahead and vote. We'll just start with you, Bryce.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Kathleen Kennedy, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Melissa Ford, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
All right. We will now go ahead and adjourn the public portion of this meeting and thank everybody who's been here tonight. Cabinet members, staff, thanks for your time tonight. Thanks for those of you who presented to the board. We appreciate you. And those of you who've been participating on YouTube, thank you for joining us. We'll go ahead and adjourn the public meeting.